Hey everyone, come on in to the webinar jam. You have arrived in the right place. My name is Sam Hill. I'm a team leader at Rocket Company, and today the Rocket Company is putting on something that I'm fired up about, and that is we're going to talk about how to create a preaching team. Okay, so maybe you don't even know what a preaching team is. you just heard the title and you thought, hey, I need one of those. If so, we're glad you're here. As you come into the room, figure out where the chat box is. And go ahead and introduce yourself. Just tell us who you are and where you're from, so we know where you're tuning in from. I just want to welcome you again. My name is Sam Hill. I'm a team leader at the Rocket Company. And today we're talking about how to create a preaching team using a predictable process. So as you arrive today, you are in the right place. Go ahead and in the chat box, tell us who you are and where you're tuning in from, where you're located. That would be fantastic. And I am looking here at the chat. Hopefully that'll appear on my here in just a second. We are excited that you're here. If you're arriving for this webinar, you have arrived in the right place. We're going to talk today about how to build a preaching team using a predictable process. And without turning pro, as I like to say. And so we are excited about that. We're going to begin this webinar in about 5 minutes. So if you're just filing in to the online room, as it were, go ahead and just tell us who you are and where you're located. We will begin our webinar, how to create a preaching team process, here in just a couple minutes. Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. My name is Sam Hill. I'm a team leader at the Rocket Company, and just want to thank you for being here today. You've arrived in the right place today if you are interested in a preaching team. And maybe you've got one and you want to make better use of it. Maybe you have never had one. You didn't even know that preaching teams existed, and you're wondering how to get one. That's what we're going to cover today. Our webinar today is how to create a preaching team. If you don't have one, you're going to leave webinar with a blueprint, a process on how to actually create a preaching team. If you've got a preaching team or something like it, pastor's council, preacher's council, etc., we're going to help give some definition for what those should look like and how to get more out of them. So you're in the right place. You've arrived at how to create a preaching team using a predictable process without becoming a pro recruiter, right? A lot of pastors want to build a preaching team, but they don't want to turn into Mr. or Mrs. Recruiter, right? Where you're trying to always get somebody to help you with preaching or fill in for you so you can take a break, etc. So we're going to talk about how to create that preaching team using a process without turning into that pro recruiter. And so I'm excited you're here. As you come in, please just tell us who you are and where you're located. There's a chat box we're going to facilitate questions through today. So familiarize yourself with that chat box, and also get ready to take notes. I want to 5 minutes to an hour of your time. We're going to respect your time today. We're going to be efficient. We're going to move fast, and you're going to want something to take notes with and write quickly so you can write down some of the principles that I'm going to share, maybe some anecdotes, some stories that I cover, that kind of stuff. So if you can, minimize other stuff, exit your email or whatever you've got to do so that you can be focused. We're here to work on you, and I'm pumped because I know that each of you, whether you are a main preaching pastor, you're a youth pastor, college pastor, no matter what type of pastor you are, leader you are, maybe you are a bivocational pastor who preaches every Sunday, we know that you need to be invested in, you need to be worked on, and so that's exactly what we're here to do, is to work on you, invest in you today. So you've arrived in the right place. We're going to begin in just about 2 minutes. Again, welcome if you're just coming in. My name is Sam Hill. I'm a team leader at The Rocket Company, and you've arrived at a webinar today. We're going to talk about how to create a preaching team using a predictable process, and so we're going to begin in just a minute or two. Thank you again in the chat, David. And as we go today, the chat box will be your reference point if you want to ask questions, and I'm going to answer a lot of questions near the end of our webinar as well. We'll begin here in just a minute. Thanks again so much for tuning in. Hey, thanks so much for tuning in today. My name is Sam Hill. I'm a team leader at The Rocket Company, and you've arrived in the right place today. If you're looking to build a preaching team, maybe you don't have one, you've never had one, you don't even know and what it could do for you in your ministry, or maybe you've got a preaching team or something like it, and you're looking for direction, definition. What should it be doing for you? How do you put more structure to it? How does a preaching team be a benefit to you and not something that stresses you out and holds you back? My name is Sam Hill. The Rocket Company today is here to invest in you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my camera off and I'm going to screen share. And if you haven't already, get out something and take notes if you can, whether it's an iPad, if you're using a good old-fashioned pen and paper, that's what I use. Get out something to take notes so you can really dial in here. We're going to move quickly, and we're going to absolutely give you all that we've got for the next 45 minutes to an hour. If you're just arriving, familiarize yourself with where the chat box is. The chat box is where you can put any questions you have today about the content, the things that I talk about. You can put them in that chat box, and Haley, who is with us today, facilitating that, is going to make sure that I get those questions so that I can answer those for you as we go today. So let me screen share. I'm going to turn off my video, and I'm going to share my presentation with you. How to create a preaching team process without turning into a pro recruiter, right? When we talk to church leaders, they want a preaching team. They want support. They want input, but they want a process to do it, and they don't want to have to turn into, you know, one of those recruiters who's constantly like, hey, you want to join this team? Hey, I need you. So we're going to talk about that process today. And my goal today is to be really practical, okay? The preachers that we talk to, what they need the most is they need someone investing in them. They need systems. They need help. They need somebody to pour into them. If you are in ministry, you spend your days, your weeks, your hours, your months, your year investing in other people. Our goal today is to invest in you. So just really quickly, the first note I want you to take is, what is a preaching team? Okay, I've had a couple preachers ask me this already before this even started. What is a preaching team? What do you mean by that? What I mean by that is a group of people, a group of leaders who provide you, the preacher, with feedback on your preaching. You all discuss, and it is a group that can give you a break from preaching. I'll say it again. It's a group of people who provide you with feedback, you discuss preaching, and you can get a break from preaching. Feedback, discussion, and a break. Key words. That's what a preaching team is. We're going to talk about the benefits. We're going to talk about how to do it today. And if you stay to the end of today's webinar, we're going to give you a free resource, and that free resource is a 90-day timeline for launching a new preacher at your church. A 90-day timeline, really simple. We get that question a lot. How do I get somebody from zero to upfront preaching, whether it's youth ministry, college ministry, up front on a Sunday morning, Saturday night service, whatever your context is, we're going to give you a timeline for how to do that just for being here. And we're going to answer a ton of questions. So any question you've got on how to build a preaching team or anything else you want to talk about today, feel free to put it in that chat box, and I'm going to answer that question. My name is Sam Hill, and I'm a Rocket Company team leader. I've been in local church preaching leadership for over 2 decades. I do public speaking, consulting. I'm passionate about helping pastors enjoy ministry, okay? I'm just passionate about it. And I want pastors to have the systems and the confidence they need to have a marathon ministry. Every day I wake up and my passion is I'm tired of seeing pastors burn out because they've just been sprinting, they're exhausted. I want you to last in ministry. And to last in ministry, you need systems, you need somebody investing in you. That's exactly what we're going to do today. You can see in my photo, I've got a family and a giant poodle who looks like something out of a children's storybook, and I take full responsibility for a 70-pound poodle that is in our house. Listen, when it comes to preaching, I've done a lot of things right, but more than that, what I want you to hear today is I've done a lot of things wrong. When it comes to building a preaching team, there's a time where I didn't ever do it, okay? If maybe you were like me, I really like the idea of a preaching team, getting feedback, discussing preaching with others so I could get better, developing other preachers so that I could actually take a break, but I never actually did it, okay? And that was wrong, all right? I should have done it. Hunter's mentality. You know, I was watching the Olympics last night. I was watching Michael Phelps, right? Just unbelievable what this guy is doing at the Olympics. It's like Bionic Man. But I was just thinking, like, you know, a lot of times when ministry, I used to treat it like it was just a sprint, okay? And all I mean is that, you know, every single week, because I was constantly shooting from the hip, I had no systems in place. I was relying on my own intuition and my own gifts and my own talent, which a lot of times were just excuses for not being organized, not having systems. I was just constantly burned out. I was exhausted. I was just, you know, bell to bell, burning the midnight candle, midnight oil, etc., flying solo, not getting feedback on my preaching, not investing in other leaders to get them to be able to preach. And the net result is I was ineffective. You know, that's the thing. Sprinting's great when you're in Rio at the Olympics, but when you're in ministry and you have to preach, whether you preach every week or just a couple times a quarter, a couple times a year, you got to get away from the sprinter's mentality, or it will be difficult to sustain ministry, and it will be difficult to be effective in ministry in the long run. It's all about being effective for a long period of time. So I've just done a lot of things wrong, and so I come to you today just saying you get to learn from my mistakes, okay? And after doing that for a lot of years, I realized that until I got regular constructive feedback on my sermons, I wouldn't grow like I should. Unless I set forth a clear path for others to preach, there wasn't going to be anybody else who could preach. And until ultimately I had a system for this, I was going to be chasing my tail in this desire to get constructive feedback and have others be able to launch into preaching and give me a break so that I could actually take care of myself as a person, etc., etc. After doing this for years, you know, I just discovered I had to make this happen, but I needed a system to do it. I discovered it the hard way. Okay, so who this is for today? It's for preachers tired. You don't get enough breaks. Maybe you never get a break, okay? This is for you. It's for preachers who are alone in their preaching. Preaching is lonely. It's very lonely because you're the only one up there, okay? There's nobody else with you. We don't preach in groups typically. We're up there. You're by yourself. You're prepping typically by yourself. It's lonely. And we know this. The Rocket Company's been serving church leaders for over a decade, 10,000 churches, okay, all over the world, and that's one of the things that we hear, is their preachers are lonely, it's hard, and this is for you if you want to get better in your preaching, whether you're a main preacher, a children's pastor, youth pastor, college pastor, if you're just like, hey, I'm here because I want to do anything that I can to get better, to serve my people more effectively, this is for you. And the hard way is sitting around thinking, wow, it sure would be nice to take a break. Okay, the hard way is sitting around just wondering what people think about your preaching if you're effective. The hard way that I did for a long time is just continuing to be lonely. Today, I want to give you a predictable process, what I call the easy way. You can learn the really hard way, but I'm coming to you today saying, hey, look, just take a little bit of time today. Let me share some things with you that can fast track you to be able to enjoy the benefits of a preaching team. It's time for a change, okay? It's time for a change. So in the past 10 years, I've delivered some of my best sermons, and it wasn't because I got smarter, took more classes, spent more time prepping, practice more or was an overnight preacher, all-star. It's not how it happened, okay? I've delivered some of my best sermons simply by implementing some systems and leaning on those, some structures, if you will. So my results are not typical, okay? And all I mean by that is you've got to be willing to change some of what you're doing when it comes to preaching and try new things. And a lot of preachers don't want to make any changes in what they do, okay? They will continue to shoot from the hip, continue to do a sprinter's mentality. You have to be willing, if you're here today, you've got to be willing to change some of what you're doing based on what I tell you. You've got to focus on implementation. You've got to focus on execution of systems. You have to understand that preaching is a marathon. It's not a weekly sprint. Slow and steady wins the race. When we talk to preachers, they're not looking to be in ministry for 5 years or 10 years typically, right? Most people get into ministry to build a long, lasting, sustaining ministry. Well, if that's the case, listen, that's a marathon. So you've got to have marathon mentalities, marathon systems in place to actually be able to sustain that. So my question to make changes, are you willing to implement, are you willing to adopt a marathon mentality? Breakthrough can happen. What I mean by that is change can happen in your preaching quickly. Okay? And I don't mean like silver bullet overnight kind of stuff. That's not what I mean. I mean that a lot of times when it comes to something like building a preaching team, some preachers never get started on it. They never start to build a preaching team because they think, I don't have time for that, it's going to take so long and all this stuff. And that's not the case. Okay? So what I'm telling you is that after an hour spent here today, you can have things that will impact what you're doing immediately. So I want you to have an urgency to your mindset today and that, hey, I'm going to apply something today and make some changes. So let me share with you what I call the 3 secrets, the 3 principles, if you will, the 3 secrets of creating a preaching team using a predictable process. Okay, those 3 secrets are this. Number 1, understand that a preaching team is just as much a need as a want. And I'm going to tell you a lot about that. Maybe the most important point right out of the gate, okay, just to show you my cards a little bit here. Number 2, you've got to have a clear on-ramp. There's too many church leaders who want a preaching team. They want other people to be raised up to preach so that they can, build out the ministry, they can take a break and on, but there's no on-ramp, and people just are sitting around wondering, how do I actually get an opportunity to preach at this church? And then number 3, how to actually spot and recruit preachers. We'll talk about some of that as well. Let's talk about this first point, though. Secret number 1 to creating a preaching team is understanding that a preaching team is just as much a need as a want. It's just as much a need as a want. So many preachers have the mentality that it would, when you talk about a preaching team that can give them constructive feedback and input, and they can discuss and get better at preaching and have preachers from that group give them a break and on, the mentality is, well, that would be nice. Okay, well, I know it would be nice, but you have to do it, or I don't have time for it. It takes too long to build. It's not a priority right now. Preaching teams, if they are only a want for you, it will likely never materialize. Just so you know, if it stays in the phase of that nice, it will be ever realize for you. If you treat a preaching team like a need, you will make one. You will make one, okay? And why should I need a preaching team, Sam? That's a question I hope you're asking. Why is it a need? What do you mean by that? Well, let me talk about 2 important points. You need a preaching team, okay? You need a preaching team. I'm going to elaborate on each of these here. Again, maybe most important thing I'm going to say, but you yourself, Mr. or Mrs. Leader, preacher, college pastor, youth pastor, your context is you need a preaching team for yourself. Okay? I'm going to give you permission right now to just focus on yourself for a second, because I know that you want to be a marathon. Put a 1 in the chat box. You just look out for these, Haley. Put a 1 in the chat box if you're a marathon leader in the church. If you don't want to just do a short stint, burnout, fallout, I'm assuming you want to have a marathon type ministry. Put a number 1 in the chat box. And what I'm telling you, marathon ministry, you yourself need a preaching team. Number 1, you need a preaching team yourself to get better at preaching, to literally just get better at it and do it more effectively, more efficiently. Too many preachers work in their preaching, but they don't work on their preaching, okay? Working in your preaching means you're writing sermons during the week, you're delivering sermons, that's fine, but that's writing a sermon. What about working on the way that you write sermons, the way that you deliver sermons? That's working on your preaching, working on your craft. I will challenge you to just think about the past 90 days. How much time, real time, have you spent, not including conferences, how much real time have you spent working on your preaching, right? You need a preaching team because it will give you a structure, a schedule to get better as a preacher, to work on your preaching, not just in your preaching. If you're only in your preaching, it's going to be super hard to get better, right? Because you're just constantly having to deliver, go, and continue to do it, right? Sprinter's mentality. You've got to work on your preaching. Let's take Michael Phelps as an example, right? The Olympics are only every 4 years. Guess what Michael Phelps has been doing for the past 4 years? Working on his races, on his strokes, right? He's known for being this guy that trains a lot, working on his actual races. That's the same principle, right? You have to spend time working on your preaching, not just in it. You need a structure of evaluation, right? How do you know if you're being effective in your preaching? And one of my challenges to you is that your spouse and your best friend are not the best indicators. There was a time in my own preaching journey where the only person that gave me feedback was my spouse. As much as I love her and as great as her feedback is for me and was for me, she's not a preacher. She doesn't preach. She loves me. She's extremely biased. Her feedback is extremely subjective, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It just means that you need other structures of evaluation to know if you're being effective. For example, you need to have people evaluating things like what our team does and did. You have to have people evaluating things like your introduction. Is this a strong introduction? Things like your illustrations. Do my illustrations illustrate and help you understand the main point of the passage? You need to have people evaluating your main points. Are the main points that I have in this sermon actually derived from the passage? Do they actually make sense, or am I just talking about things I want to talk about? And application, right? You have to have people evaluate your application. So you create a structure of evaluation that will help you get better. Listen to me. If you don't have a structure of evaluation, how do you know how to get better? You can't know because you don't. There's no target. There's nothing that you're actually working through. It's all just going to be hearsay and friends telling you, hey, that was a really great sermon, brother. Well, that's fine. All that's fine and well. We all need encouragement, but you need an actual structure so that the feedback you get will be applicable and you can actually get better. That's the first reason why you need a preaching team. Number two, second reason why you need a preaching team is because you need a break. You need a break to avoid burnout, right? As it says there, number two, to avoid burnout. When we talk to, and I don't have to talk about the statistics of burnout for people in ministry. We all know it's just sky high right now. It's crazy high. It's one of the saddest parts of ministry that needs to change. And one of the ways that will help it change is through systems like this so that preachers can actually take a break, right? Too many preachers preach way too often. They don't take care of themselves because you don't get enough sleep. You're constantly stressed. You're constantly sprinting. And so you're physically tired. You're emotionally exhausted. You're spiritually exhausted. Your own devotional life is almost non-existent because all you do is work in your sermons, in your ministry. You don't work on yourself, on your sermons, on your ministry. And so you're tired. And that's what leads to burnout, right? And I always challenge preachers on this point when it comes to burnout. The reason why you need a preaching team is so that you don't feel like you are the guru, the spiritual guru. There are too many preachers today who have gotten stuck in this place in their church where they are the quote-unquote spiritual guru. And maybe that's you. And maybe you even like being the spiritual guru. But what I'm telling you is that there was only one ever spiritual guru, quote-unquote, and it was Jesus. It's not you. And to avoid burnout, you have to get out of this. You know, everybody's constantly talking about they're just amazed at everything that you get done and on and on and on. You absolutely need to make sure that you don't get stuck in the guru, spiritual guru treadmill. You need to be able to take breaks and avoid burnout. We had a preacher that I talked to recently who said, the biggest change I ever made was I stopped preaching 50 times a year and 48 times a year, and I'm down to in between 35 and 40. Right? Which means, if you do the math, they're taking a solid 2 to 3 months off of preaching, which is huge. Think about what that would do. Think if you could just take, maybe you're at a point right now where you couldn't even take a month off. Think if you could take 1, 2, 3 months off, that would have on your long-term ministry. You need a preaching team, number one, to get better, number two, to avoid burnout, number three, to fulfill your mission. Part of what you're supposed to be doing is raising up and sending out other preachers. You need a preaching team. And for some of you, this is challenging because you don't want to admit you need a preaching team. You like being the spiritual guru. You've got to get out of that position and acknowledge that you need this support structure to help you be a marathon preacher. Now, second reason, your people themselves need a preaching team. It's not just you. Your people need a preaching team, okay? Here's why your people need a preaching team. Number one, to grow spiritually, all right? They don't need only one spiritual teacher in their life. There's different styles of preaching. Your style is effective and people learn from it, but it's not the only style. People can benefit from other types of preachers. Not everyone gets all they could or should from only one person. It's one of the reasons why people love conferences. You ever notice that? Whether it's youth groups or people go to a conference or a weekend event, whatever it is, one of the reasons why people enjoy it so much is because they get to hear different people. That's one of the reasons why we love it, because when you hear different people, it does something different in your mind and your heart, and you grow in a different way. So your people need a preaching team to grow because variety is good, okay? Variety is good in preaching. Number two, to perpetuate a healthy culture in your church. That's why your people need a preaching team, so that they know that Jesus is the only spiritual guru and not any person. That's why, right? You need to model for them rest. You need to model for them peace and life pace and life rhythm. If you are constantly sprinting and burning out and just do it all, your people will model that. And that's not the Christian life that you want to model for them. You want to model for them a model where you are creating disciples of Christ, not just disciples of yourself, right? So to perpetuate a healthy culture in your church, your people also will benefit from a preaching team. Number three, your people need a preaching team to fulfill their mission, right? If you have a preaching team as a way to raise up other preachers, then preachers who are in your congregation right now, among your people, sitting there, waiting to be tapped and launched out into the field, can do that when you have a preaching team. So to fulfill their mission, the preachers in your church who need to be preaching because God has called them to preach, when you have a preaching team, they will have the opportunity to do that. So you need a preaching team, and your people need a preaching team. Secret number one is just understanding that a preaching team is just as much a need as a want. Let's talk about two preachers, and I've changed their name, but Preacher Tom is one example of a preacher I've coached, didn't get any feedback besides his wife and maybe one or two super close friends, so did not get regular feedback. Preacher Tom smiles on Sunday. Preacher Tom, quote unquote, does it all, right? People just can't believe how much he gets done. Preacher Tom can't say no, but Preacher Tom has shared with me one-to-one secretly that even though he's got a smile on, even though everybody's clapping and are so amazed at everything he's able to accomplish, he is incredibly lonely and he's exhausted, and he's drinking 3 macchiatos a day at Starbucks just to keep awake. He's not taking care of his body. He's physically exhausted. His heart is not in it because he can't work on himself, and because he can't work on his preaching. He's only working in his preaching. He's just lost the heart behind it, his passion. He's starting to not believe everything that he says. He doesn't have a regular devotional life. His devotional life for his own heart, his own relationship with God, is rushed, totally rushed. You know what else is rushed in Preacher Tom's life? Is his time with his wife and his kids. And so because he feels so rushed and he's not getting feedback and on, Preacher Tom is secretly exhausted and will not be in ministry if he doesn't make significant changes to his schedule, to his systems, and his life. Preacher Jamal, on the other hand, okay, Preacher Jamal gets feedback one time a month. It's not like he's doing a sit-down 3-hour meeting every single Sunday after the sermon. Once a month, they meet at a coffee shop for 1 hour. He's got a team of about 5 people. They work on application. They talk about the different parts of Jamal's sermons. They talk about his introduction and his illustrations, his main points, his application. Preacher Jamal has used this forum once per month to raise up some other preachers so that he can actually take breaks at regular intervals. And because Preacher Jamal takes breaks at regular intervals, he's fresh. He's preaching less, but his quality is higher. Put a 1 in the chat box if you would be okay with preaching even just a little less if you knew your quality would go up dramatically. Put a 1 in the chat box. Oh, and Preacher Jamal, his family, right, his family relationships are good. His family's happy. And it's because Preacher Jamal has a system. He is not exhausted and worn out. My question for you, are you more like Preacher Tom or more like Preacher Jamal? No matter where you fall, okay, you can make changes and implement systems to enable you to become a marathon and sustain, a marathon minister and preacher and sustain for the long run. So secret number 1 to creating a preaching team is just this mindset, this understanding that you need a preaching team, your people need a preaching team. It is much more than just a want and a, hey, that would be nice. Secret number 2 is have a clear on-ramp. Okay, have a clear on-ramp. The question is, if you have a preaching team, okay, or if you want to have a preaching team, how do you get people on it, right? That's one thing people always ask, like, hey, this is fantastic, this is like just huge, but how do I, like, literally, how do I get them to the meetings? Like, what does it look like to actually have an on-ramp to a preaching team? Okay, so I want to give you literally exactly what it looks like, all right, and here's just 4 sort of steps for you. You have an interest meeting, okay, that's kind of the catalyst. You have a preaching team interest meeting, okay, and you're going to do 4 things at this meeting. You're going to tell them why. You're going to teach on preaching. You keep it short. You are going to give some expectations, and you're going to talk about a process, okay? A process. All begins with the interest meeting. Let me cover, just pretend you have an interest meeting 4 weeks from today or 2 weeks from today, or maybe if you really want to jump all over it, maybe it's this Sunday right after the service or whatever. What's going to happen at this interest meeting? Let's walk through each of these points as what's going on. Tell them why. That's the first thing you want to do at the interest meeting. Tell them why you are building a preaching team. And as I mentioned earlier, if you're a preacher who likes being the guru, this will be a big challenge for you, because the first thing you're going to tell them is that you need a preaching team. And you're going to explain to them why you need a preaching team so that you can get better, so that you don't burn out. The second thing you're going to tell them is why they need a preaching team. They need a preaching team because they need to hear from other people. And there are other preachers in their congregation who want to preach and should be able to preach and can be launched, etc. You're going to tell them why you're building a preaching team. It's important that they understand the vision, that they understand both the benefit for you as their lead pastor, college pastor, whatever your context is. They do need to understand why you need it. And I'm telling you that they will rally around you. People respond to humility. They respond to somebody who humbles themselves and says, I need structures and support. Will you be that for me? So they will rally around you. Also, when you cast vision for the corporate benefits of a preaching team, they will rally around that too. They will begin to have vision themselves. Doesn't mean that every single person on the preaching team has to be a preacher. And I'm going to cover that in a few minutes here. Doesn't mean that's the case. It means that their input matters, etc. So you want to have an interest meeting. You want to tell them why you are creating a preaching team. Second thing you want to talk about at the interest meeting, you want to teach on preaching. All I mean by that is you want to give some kind of context, depending on your congregation, how big it is, how small it is, locales, everybody's experience, and on and on. There are lots of different things that play into somebody considering preaching, being on a preaching team, etc. You want to create some kind of context. I'm not going to tell you exactly what that should look like because context can be different. All I mean is that you want to create some framework for what preaching is. And I recommend you open the Bible, you teach from the Bible, and give examples of preaching and talk about what preaching is like in your church, right? That's what you should be doing during this time of the interest meeting, talking about what preaching is like at your church. Maybe you cover, hey, we teach expositional type sermons here. We deliver topical sermons. Here's what we emphasize. Here's the cultural ramifications that are so important in our context, in our city, in our town, that we need to be aware of when we preach a sermon. So you're just going to lay down some foundational work for preaching at your church. Also with this interest meeting, you're going to talk about expectations. Expectations for what? Expectations for the actual preaching team. Hey, if you want to participate, you're here at this interest meeting, you obviously have some interest. Here's the expectations of what this will look like. We are going to meet once per month. And in addition to creating some scheduling expectations, maybe you create format. When we meet hour, we're going to look at the last sermon preached, whether it's you or somebody else, and we're going to break it down into 4 parts as an example, and we're all going to give our input on introductions, on illustrations, on the main point, and on application. And just so this doesn't become a critique fest, as I call it, right? So I don't want you to think that preaching team is all about 1 hour, everybody's telling you everything that was wrong with your sermon. Just so we're really, really clear. That's what you should be doing the whole time. There's definitely a place for that. And people will give you great feedback. If you're willing to receive critical feedback, then they will give you critical feedback. But maybe you spend, if it's an hour time, 30 minutes reviewing the last sermon preached. Here's what's great about it. Here's what could have been better. Okay, cool. You've got some things you can take away to get better at. The next 30 minutes, maybe you spend some time talking about another text. Hey, if we were preaching this text, if we were preaching on this topic, let's, as a group, as a preaching team, let's talk about what type of introduction is helpful. Let's talk about what type of illustrations might be helpful. Let's talk about what we think the main point of this passage is. Let's now talk about some applications for our lives and the people in our church, right? So in the expectation part of your interest meeting, talk about the schedule, right? When will you meet? Maybe it's once per month or whatever you think makes sense. Then lay down a format. When we meet, it will be an hour meeting. We're going to talk about my previous sermon and whoever preached for approximately a half hour in a constructive way, following a specific format. And then we're going to together build a sermon, if you will, so that we can all get better. And then the other expectation for the preaching team is, hey, I would like to raise up other preachers. Hey, I would be just so happy if somebody else with a preaching gift was identified and could preach on a Sunday morning, and so you would set that expectation as well. So that's one really important thing, in addition at the interest meeting to actually telling them why you're building a preaching team and talking about preaching. You want to lay expectations for the actual preaching team. And then lastly, you want to have a process, some type of process at your interest meeting, an interest meeting for how to build a preaching team, an interest meeting where people are saying, yes, I'd like to participate in a preaching team. You want to have a process that they can leave that interest meeting from and then go to the next thing. Specifically, I have in mind here people who want to preach, because that's one thing you're going to get a lot of, depending on the size of your church. Maybe it'll be a ton, etc. But you want to have a process that people can identify and say, hey, here's how I can actually get into the line, if you will, to be able to preach. And I recommend a simple, clear process. As an example, they could fill out an inventory form. That inventory form just simply details any experience they might have, why they want to preach. You can create an inventory form. Schedule a one-on-one with somebody who would like to preach on a Sunday morning. And then, if it makes sense, create a 90-day calendar so that they actually have a preaching date in mind. Okay, so when we talk about creating a preaching team, there's 3 secrets to doing that. Secret number 1, and understand that a preaching team is a need. It is not just a want. You have to, secret number 2, have a clear on-ramp for people to join your preaching team, whether it's potential future preachers or people who will just be great at giving you feedback. And then secret number 3, how do you actually spot potential recruiters? How do you actually, how do you actually spot and recruit potential preachers? Right, so the question is, hey, if I'm getting inventory forms back and I've got interest in people who want to preach, how can I actually identify who might be a good candidate to preach on a Sunday morning or Saturday night service, etc.? Well, I'm going to give you just a really simple formula, if you will, to spot and recruit preachers. And it's just really straightforward. It's called EHP, is the acronym that I use, and it stands for Experience, Humility, and Potential. And all I mean by this is when somebody shows interest in preaching, sometimes we can import what we like in preachers into what we into somebody, whether they may or may not be a good fit for preaching, which isn't what you want to do. You want to have some type of criteria that is objective so that it's not just your opinions, although your opinions are not going to be able to be avoided, and that's okay. You want to have some type of objective criteria to evaluate somebody if they should be up preaching on a Sunday morning. Experience, humility, and potential is a great way to work through a potential candidate. Experience, things like, are they biblically competent? Should be a absolutely essential part of that. You could also look for things like, have they preached in the past? Do they have preaching experience? Or maybe it's just general speaking competency. That's how I actually came to preach at churches, was just through speaking competency. I did it a lot outside of the church context. I also was biblically competent, and so a leader said to me one time, hey, why don't you just combine these two things? One's a gifting and one is study, and consider preaching on a Sunday. So you want to look for experience. Maybe speaking competency just means they're a teacher outside of church. Maybe they teach at seminary or at a college or at a local high school, whatever it might be. Maybe they're a public speaker. Maybe they're a business leader. So look for competencies. Look for biblical competency and experience. Let's talk about humility. Avoid the rock star persona. If somebody is competent, meaning they have the skills and the study background required to preach, then are they humble? Should they be up in front of people preaching? Avoid the rock star persona, a great rule of thumb. If you don't want to create a culture of spiritual gurus, you want to create a culture of disciples of Christ, then you want to make sure you're not launching preachers up front and out into other churches, etc., who have the rock star guru persona. You want to identify somebody who takes study very seriously so that they're not up there shooting from the hip, creating and making up whatever they want texts to mean instead of what the text actually does mean. So you want to make sure that they show humility by taking study seriously, meaning they don't know everything. They recognize they need other people to help them understand the Bible. And then number 3, cares about people, right? They're a shepherd. So you want to look for earmarks of humility. You also want to look for potential, right? You want to look for preachers who are regularly getting feedback. They want feedback. If they're wanting to be a part of this group, that's a really great indicator, but they're asking for input. Maybe they preach in a smaller setting, like maybe it's a Bible study or a Sunday morning Sunday school class before a Sunday morning. Are they asking for feedback so that they can make changes and grow? Their potential to get better as a preacher is there, and they're showing that, and you see growth in their teaching as they go. And then potential just means they can actually repeat it, right? They're not a one-hit wonder, for lack of better words, meaning you see enough potential in this person, enough gifting and talent to where not only could they preach one time, but it could actually be sustainable. And this is really important, you all, because you don't just want somebody who's going to preach once or maybe twice and that's it. You want to try to allow people to preach who can repeat it so that you can begin to create systems and say, hey, Bob or Sally or whatever your context is, they could preach 4 to 6 times a year, whatever it is, and you create a preaching calendar, and then all of a sudden you have systems and structure in place where you will be more effective in your preaching because you have a system in place. So you want to look for experience, you want to look for humility, you want to look for potential. Preacher Tom, okay, doesn't have any type of context for what it means to be a preacher. In other words, Preacher Tom just knows that he's a preacher and he knows how he likes to preach and his way of doing it and the way that the commentaries that he likes and the type of preachers that he likes. And so Preacher Tom has such a vacuum around him, doesn't any feedback, that he has a difficult time raising up other preachers. Think about this, okay? If you have a difficult time, you don't have a structure to identify preachers, it's going to be really hard to get other preachers because nobody knows what you're looking for, which is why meetings and laying out clear expectations and teaching about preaching from the Bible are so crucial, so that people aren't wondering. Maybe this is the case in your church if there's a vacuum of preaching leadership. Maybe nobody really knows what the process is maybe really doing because you haven't laid out. So Preacher Tom falls into this category because Preacher Tom is vague on preaching. His people are vague on preaching and what it means. Preacher Jamal had an interest meeting. Preacher Jamal got people to this meeting. He laid out expectations for the preaching team. He taught from the Bible about what preaching needs to look like at their church in their context. and he laid out a 90-day plan for people that have interest in preaching. Doesn't mean that every single person gets to preach, but it means that he's got a structure by which people feel like they know how to get an opportunity to at least be considered. And so, over the course of a couple months, Jamal has a preaching team and a schedule created, and he's preaching instead of 50 times a year, 40 times a year. He's preaching less, but his quality is much, much higher. Preaching is a marathon, my friends. It is not a sprint. A long preaching ministry is a marathon, not a sprint, and you need a preaching team to help you do that. Better systems result in better preaching. That's crucial that you understand that. Better preaching systems will result in better preaching. Lack of systems will decrease quality of preaching, impact of preaching, and the sustainability of your preaching as well. Three secrets in review. Secret number one to creating a preaching team: understand that preaching team is just as much a need as a want. Just as much a need as a want. Secret number two: have a clear on-ramp to building a preaching team. And then secret number three: when you have a preaching team, know how to spot and recruit preachers so that you can create what I call a bullpen of preachers, and you can call them out to give you a break and instruct your people, which will result in a great, wonderful, healthy, vibrant, growing ministry. I'm going to do some Q&A. I've had a ton of questions come across here, and if you still have questions, please put those in the chat. Haley, I've got these in front of me. Maybe you could, I've got them here, Haley, actually, so I'll just read them out loud, and then I will then answer those questions. Thanks for sending these over, Haley. I've got a couple questions here. Davis asks, how long should a person serve on your preaching team? Davis, if you just mean in terms of longevity, you know, I would create some type of expectation on the front end, maybe how long this is going to last before you change it out. Depending on the size of your church, you might have two different preaching teams, if you will, right? So I recommend keeping the group small enough to where people can actually have input, you know. And so I would say, how long should they be on a preaching team? How long should they serve? I don't know, 6 months to a year or something like that. I would have a defined end date and make sure people understand that a rotation is good. Some churches may not have that luxury, right? They may not have enough people to rotate people in and out. So I think it's going to vary based on your context. I think variety, if possible, is good. I think it'll keep your people fresh and just create that expectation that, hey, this is going to be a 6-month preaching team, and then you're going to rotate off and come back 6 months later, and it's not a reflection of, you know, your input stunk or anything like that. It's just we're going to keep everybody fresh, and we don't want to wear you out. We know you have a life, and on and on. So that is my recommendation there. Let's see what else we got. Don wants to know, how do I promote the interest meeting? Don, I would promote it from probably different ways, different channels you could do that, depending on the size of the church. If you're in a much larger church, I don't know that I would do it from up front because the response could be so overwhelming you'll never be able to facilitate it. So maybe the larger the church, maybe the smaller I'd make that messaging in terms of advertising, if you will, that you're having a preaching team and here's when the interest meeting is. So maybe the larger the church, the smaller the channel that you want to communicate to. And then I would say if it's a smaller church, maybe let's just say 25 all the way up to 300 or 400, I would probably announce it from up front because I think it will be incredible. And I've been in churches where from up front it's been made known that they want the input of members in preaching. And you've got to obviously walk a fine line because let's just call it what it is. In any type of organization, church or otherwise, you're going to have what I call positives, neutrals, and negatives when it comes to feedback, okay? This isn't a label for people. This is evaluating feedback. Some people struggle to give constructive feedback. They're negative feedback givers. And that it is what it is. That's okay. That's we all have the struggle. So you have to be able to identify who's probably not a good fit for this, etc. But I would just recommend the largest forum you can, obviously, if you're in a smaller church, to get the most amount of interest is very, very important. Wow, just tons and tons of questions, which is great. I've got Bert here. Bart, what happens if a member of your preaching team turns out to be a disastrous preacher, but they thought they were good? How do you put them back on the bench? Wow, that's really, really tough. I would say first and foremost, Bart, what's really important is that you lay out expectations. That's why that communication is so key, because I would say ideally, and of course I can be Monday morning quarterback all day, ideally you never want them up front if they're going to be a disaster, okay? You want to be able to figure that out early and often. I recommend, and that's part of what I'm going to share at the very end of this webinar actually. Remember, we promised you 90 days to launch as a preacher. We've got kind of I've just got a really quick timeline I'll give you for somebody who's a potential preacher. Well, one of the destination points to get an opportunity to preach is an actual practice round. And some churches will say that's unspiritual, you shouldn't do it. That's fine if that's your position, but I'm just telling you, nobody at a church that I've been in leadership at will get a chance to preach on Sunday morning if they don't get a dry run in front of other leaders at the church on a Saturday night or Wednesday night or whatever before they're up on a Sunday morning. Now, if they do deliver a sermon and it's a disaster, etc., what do you do? How do you put them back on the bench? You just have to do it. That's the biggest thing I would say. You have to communicate to them, hey, this is why you're not going to be able to preach another time, and this is why this idea of having a structure is so crucial, Bert and Bart, so that your feedback isn't just what you think. This is where preachers that are in the spiritual guru mode are ultimately in such a perilous place. It's because everything is subject to their own preferences, their own opinions, their own personality, their own rock star, platform, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so nothing's truly objective. It's all based on, well, what does rock star preacher think about this? Well, it doesn't matter ultimately just what they think about it. So you have to have some type of constructive feedback. I would also, Bert and Bart, do that with the input of some other caring leaders along with you. So it's not just yourself saying, hey, that was a bad sermon, I don't think you should preach anymore. You say, hey, we have 4 or 5 people that we had just get some feedback, and they're different types of people in different walks of life, and there was sort of this group consensus that it really wasn't a helpful sermon, and so because of that, we don't want you to do it again at this time. However, if you do want to talk about that further, here's a process that you maybe could get another chance, right? And so you're always giving people an opportunity to respond. Let's look at some other questions here, and then I'm going to keep going, and I'll cover more questions at the end along with our 90-day launch plan, okay? Let's see. There are a ton of questions. I'm just literally trying to sort through them here. Do you need people, Jerry asks, with different backgrounds and different perspectives? How do I avoid having yes men on my team? That's a great question. I would say absolutely, if you can get people with different backgrounds and perspectives on your preaching team, it is a huge benefit. What I don't mean is people who believe things that are obviously drastically different than you in terms of your confession of faith and what your church believes. So obviously, whatever your major doctrinal points are, people on your preaching team should adhere to those. But the application of those, right, depending on their own upbringing and their own sphere of life and their job and their context and their experiences, they are going to bring perspectives that are crucial. It is a massive help if you have people with different backgrounds and perspectives, and here's why, and it relates to what I just said. It's because it will allow you to be more effective, because you're going to hear from people who are not like you, who don't have your experiences, who don't have your family situation, who don't have your current position, etc. And what that's going to do is make you go, oh man, I've been missing this group of people. And that's why it's so important you don't have a guru culture, is because everybody's just going to be like you if you have a guru persona, and you are the only one who ever preaches, and you are okay with that, and you like being the go-to slam dunk Michael Jordan type of person. You're only going to get yes men. That's the interesting thing about gurus, is they attract people who are only just like them, and that's problematic. It builds a church culture where everybody's the exact same. So it's very important to get different backgrounds and perspectives. Even if it means somebody who's not maybe the most eloquent, doesn't mean they have to preach. Somebody who's not, whatever it might mean, it's huge to have them a part of it, because it's going to allow you to tap into needs and wants and desires and things of people that are attending your church. So I hope that's helpful, Jerry. Was that helpful for you? If that was, put a 1 in the chat box maybe. Hey, I'm going to cover some more questions here in just a little bit and cover our launch plan. I hope that this has been time well spent so far. I can't cover it all. I wish I could talk with each one of you, because we would cover so much stuff that would help you. We've got another day, because here's the thing. Old habits die hard when it comes to preaching and preaching systems. You need systems in place for your preaching. You need somebody working on you. Okay, think about the areas of your life. I was just thinking about this today, where you work on yourself. You have a schedule. You have a system in place. People have a system. Preachers have a system for dieting, for going on a date with their spouse. You have a time, a place you go. For working out, you have a process and a system for getting dressed right on Sunday morning before you go preach. You have a process in your church for giving and for small groups. You have a process for taking care of your car when you have scheduled oil changes. But yet, lots of preachers don't have any systems in place to work on their preaching. And because of that, the same habits, they die hard. So what I want to offer you today, and what the Rocka Company has assembled, is a step-by-step system that you will be thrilled will help you grow in your preaching, and it's called the Preaching Rocket. It's designed to take the stress and worry out of creating powerful sermons each week. You won't preach effectively, you won't preach for the long term if you preach stressed and worried, which, if I had to sum up a lot of the conversations we have with over 10,000 church leaders the past decade, it would be stress and worry is one of the things that we hear a lot. Preaching Rocket is a coaching system designed to help take out some of that stress, take out that worry, so that you can deliver powerful sermons week after week. Here's what's included in the Preaching Rocket. Different modules. There's 12 modules laid out almost like a private coaching program from the standpoint of, we get asked a lot after webinars, hey, can Sam coach somebody? Can one of the other leaders coach? Yes, but we can't coach everybody. So what's really important is that you have a way to access coaching on your own time schedule, so you can see modules that come to you in digital format, how to build a great sermon, modules like creating sermons that stick, how to deal with criticism, not that any of us need help with that, how to develop an annual monthly, weekly preaching calendar, which would change and revolutionize your church if you don't have one. Total game changer, just that module alone. Preaching to the unchurched, the crucial first 5 minutes, preaching that elicits a response. Module 8, preaching the gospel. Module 9, becoming a master of stories and illustrations. Module 10, how to create a preaching dream team, which is exactly what we're talking about right now. Module 11, how to improve your sermon prep process, and then the missing ingredient that will change everything. Here's how the Preaching Rocket works, just so we're all clear. There's 12 modules, one per month. It's an online learning system with video, audio, text-based training. You can take it with you. There is even a support group. In other words, you're not walking through this alone. There is a community of church leaders just like you who are asking questions, getting answers to those questions, and learning from their peers and colleagues. So you can watch it, you can listen to it from your iPhone, iPad, whatever device you have on the go, on your commutes, etc. You can access this. It's like being coached 12 months of the year on a schedule. That's what the Preaching Rocket is, working on different strategic parts of your preaching. Now, who's this for? Well, it's for preachers who are maybe brand new and you want a solid foundation. You're like, hey, I just started the marathon yesterday and I want to make sure it's a 30-year run and not 5. Great. You need a system. You have to have something that's working on you. It's for pastors who are plateaued and stuck. If you're a preacher and you're just like, I feel so stale in my preaching, I'm not growing, I really need to just bust out of where I'm at, break through. This is for you. Okay, it's Pastor 3. Things are going great, but you don't want to slip. You want to stay fresh. You need a system in place. That's what the Preaching Rocket is designed to do, on a schedule, so you're accountable. It's delivered to you in different formats, so you know you're going to watch it and listen to it and take it with you. And it's strategic modules put together. And listen, I tell every preacher when we talk about this, you've got 2 choices when it comes to investing in yourself, building out systems. First option is just go on fumes. Like, just don't do anything different. I mean, that's an option. A lot of preachers do that. They think that a 1-hour webinar is going to be enough to change patterns that have them exhausted and lonely, and it's not, okay? The second option is leverage a platform like the Preaching Rocket, designed by pastors for pastors to keep you accountable and actually help you grow as a preacher. Those are the options that you have. Here again, almost $3,500 of value in the Preaching Rocket, and the reason why we say that is this, okay? When we talk to church leaders and we say, hey, how great would it be if you could have somebody like Jeff Henderson, you could have somebody actually actually coaching you on a one-to-one basis just once a month, man, what would that be worth to you? And they're just like, it would be a game changer. And I always tell preachers, that's exactly what the Preaching Rocket is. I mean, it is like having one-to-one coaching in your comfort of your own house, your own office, at your own schedule, but it has something you can follow so you know that you're going to actually make progress. That's what this is. And that's why we say $3,500 of value, because if you had a private coach who spent 12 times with you throughout the year, it would be that much or more, no doubt. When you sign up today for the Preaching Rocket, we're going to throw in some bonuses because we really like to give you some freebies, as we call them, right? Some added zing to help you grow as a preacher. So our first bonus is, you sign up today, we're going to give you 10 new sermon stories that you can use, and we're going to have this for the first 35 preachers who sign up for the Preaching Rocket today, a season's worth of messages to give you back your Saturdays, which is the goal. One of the main goals of the Preaching Rocket is to give you back your weekends so that you can have confidence and enjoy it. So we're going to give you 10 new sermon stories, okay, over $4,000 value. We're also going to give you, for the first 25 preachers, Upfront Digital, okay? Just hang with me for a second. Upfront Digital is a literally end-to-end help you make your next presentation the best presentation. So we're talking about preaching systems, but when you get up front, like, what's your method for delivering a message, and how do you make your messages more engaging, more effective, etc. Upfront Digital is just helping you make your next presentation the best presentation through resources, through coaching, through examples, through community, through the Preaching Rocket, where lots of other people are going through it. We're going to include Upfront Digital, a $500 value, for free today, immediately, when you sign up for the Preaching Rocket. Think about this. If all the Preaching Rocket did, if all it did, just bare minimum, is just give you a steady plan to help you invest in yourself, just a steady plan, once a month, 1 hour, just what would that do over the next year? If all it did was give you some coaching and training from experts you respect, just on a regular schedule, would it be worth it? If it gave you your weekends back, right, took the stress away so that you could be more effective and enjoy it, would it be worth it? I always ask preachers, like, when it comes to investing in yourself, as I mentioned earlier, where you can work in your sermons or you can work on your sermons, right? You need to work on your sermons, on yourself. And I just say, do you know what this is worth to you to work on yourself so that you have more confidence and you have more of a plan? You can actually feel good about your sermons, which means you'll preach them better. You'll have more time with your kids and family, which will help you be a marathon preacher. And it just gives you your weekends back. Like, less stress. How much would it actually be worth it to have coaching? So you can see when we say it's a great deal at $4,000, and we typically offer this for literally $997. You can check on our website. But what we've done today, because you're special, because you're here, you've spent time, we know you're ready to invest in yourself, is you can get started with the Preaching Rocket today for $69 a month. I mean, wow. PreachBetterNow.com for $69 a month. And I want to put this in perspective for you, okay? Because most preachers don't invest in themselves at all. It's one of the things that I've noticed. Most preachers, they don't invest in themselves. They feel guilty about investing in themselves. They feel like they shouldn't have to because they've believed that they need to be the guru, Michael Jordan, do it all. But here's the thing. This is $17 a Sunday. If you look at $69 a month to have regular scheduled coaching with video, audio, resources, tools, and other preachers doing the same thing, it's $17 a Sunday or $2 a day. And I will just confess to you, because I had a venti coffee this morning, there are preachers who spend more money on coffee per month than they do investing and growing and working on their preaching. Okay, and I've been in that camp. There was a time where I spent more on Starbucks coffee than I did getting better as a preacher, which, as to quote Kevin O'Leary, because I like the Shark Tank, stop the madness, right? Stop that madness. $69 a month at PreachBetterNow.com. You can get started with the Preaching Rocket, and we're going to give you another bonus, what we call our Fast Action Bonus. Our Fast Action Bonus is just like, hey, if you're willing to make a change today, as I mentioned at the start of this webinar, doesn't have to be a 6, 12, 18-month ramp-up to make changes in your preaching. You can make a change today. And so for making that change, our Fast Action Bonus, for the first 15 people, we're going to send you a Sermon Craft notebook, which is literally a physical notebook you will get in the mail that will help you craft your sermons each and every week. You can get started at preachbetternow.com, $69 a month for access to the Preaching Rocket, 12 coaching modules that you can go through. Go to this website, go to preachbetternow.com, at least take 2 minutes and look at the offering, look at the modules, look at the testimonials, and just ask yourself, is this worth $2 a day? Is this worth $17 a Sunday? If I invested $17 every time I got up and preached for somebody to coach me and counsel me before I stood up to preach, what kind of impact would it have? That's what you need to ask yourself today. I'm going to take some more questions here, and Haley, feel free to continue to send them over. Somebody asked earlier, if you're not the main preacher in the church, how do you suggest approaching the main pastor on starting a preaching team? That is a great question. I would just go and I would ask this main pastor questions. I would just say, hey, I heard that there's some churches doing this thing called a preaching team, okay? And the preaching team is designed to help you as the main preacher, just so you don't feel alone. It's also designed for people that, may want to preach someday, want to have impact, just like community, just a way for us to grow as leaders. Would you be interested in just like learning about it, or could I just send you maybe a quick summary of what it might be and see if it would be helpful? That's probably what I would do. Now, my comment to you is that sometimes preachers could go back on their heels if you're not the main preacher, right? And you tell the main preacher, let's have a preaching team so you can get better at your preaching. They can go back on their heels a little bit like, hey, come on, I need to get better. So just be aware of that. So I think the spirit which you bring in, the words you use, the tone, everything's really important so they don't feel like you're saying, hey, I'd love to have a forum to help you get better at preaching because they may not be the most receptive to that kind of approach. So I hope that is helpful. Somebody asked earlier, when you meet with your preaching team, is it best to meet on Monday so sermon evaluation is fresh? There's not one right answer to that. Obviously, I think there's benefits, pros and cons to both, actually, both sides of this. In other words, yes, if you met on Mondays, it would be fresh. However, sometimes I think we can react emotionally to sermons. In other words, you could just like draw evaluations and judgments and criticisms about a message or something, and maybe there hasn't been enough time, the Holy Spirit hasn't had enough time to work in your heart, hasn't been enough time for you to just mentally digest everything. So there's pros and cons. Yes, it'll be fresher. You may get some more knee-jerk reactions. That's fine. You can work through all that kind of stuff. But I think there's pros and cons to both. I would just do it in a way that's sustainable. I know sometimes, at least for me personally, I don't like doing a lot of meetings and stuff on Sundays and Mondays just because I'm tired, right? And so if there's this feeling of, man, I just need a break so I can get the most out of the time. So there may be that kind of feeling as well. Let me take another question here. Somebody had asked earlier, what was it? What disqualifies, Danny asks, what disqualifies somebody from being on the preaching team? That's a good question, Danny. I think some of that you'd have to just figure out for your own context what would mean somebody's disqualified. That's a strong word. It can mean a lot of different things. Disqualified typically means they've done something wrong, which is why they can't participate. So if your question is who's a good fit for the preaching team, then I'm going to say, hey, people who are a good fit are people who can contribute, people who want to be a part of it, people who can commit to it, so they're not in and out. I think that's really important too. If you've got somebody just in and out, that can sometimes adversely affect the group because you've got maybe one strong personality that only shows up every once in a while when they feel like weighing in. Sometimes that can be distracting. So I think you've got two categories. One is who's a good fit, who would be a helpful contributor to the preaching team, and then the other is who's just literally disqualified. And that I would just say, obviously there's biblical disqualifications for people in leadership at churches that you could use to evaluate that type of question. I'll answer one or two more questions in here in just a minute, and I'm also going to give my 90 days to launch as a preacher. I'm going to take a quick sip of water. Has this been helpful? Can you just put a 1 in the chat box if it's helped you in any way, even just 1 point? I need encouragement just like you do. Has it been helpful today? Put a 1 in the chat box here as I take a drink of water. Great. And you can actually go to preachbetternow.com and take a look at the Preaching Rocket. Take a look at these 12 modules. You can see what is available to you. You can go at preaching alone and do nothing. I mean, or can you just take a few minutes? Is it worth your time to check out preachbetternow.com so you don't have to keep spinning your wheels? You can actually have a strategy to follow. You've got Preacher Tom, as I mentioned, who's just secretly totally lonely, and maybe that's you, and totally nobody knows it. You don't want to continue that track. You will be totally worn out. You will not last. You want to do as Preacher Jamal did, and that is build out the systems for your preaching to help you get better. Over $4,000 of value for $69 a month, $17 a Sunday, $2 a day. Come on, it is an unbelievable opportunity to put something in place right now that will change preaching. Let's talk about 90 days to launch a preacher, okay? Your freebie for being here. I want to cover these, and that way if you have a few questions, maybe you could ask them. 90 days to launch as a preacher. I don't have a slide for this. I'm just going to give you three sort of dates, if you will, three meetings that are strategic from day 0 to day 90 to launch a preacher. So let's just say that you have actually identified somebody who should get an opportunity to preach. You want them to preach. Day 0, if you will, okay, your first meeting point. There's 3 meeting points to day 90. Day 0 is you put a preaching Sunday on the calendar. Okay, it's the first thing you do. Hey, 90 days from now, or whatever, however long it is, this is the Sunday where you will be preaching. You choose the text or the topic, so they know when and they know what. This is what you will be preaching about. You then recommend resources. You then give them a sermon model to follow. That's one of the things that I recommend. And I mentioned this earlier. I think Bert or Bart had this question about, hey, what if somebody just has a disaster? This is why expectations are so clear. So I recommend some type of model that they need to use to preach their first sermon. Doesn't mean they've got to stick to it for the rest of their life. Doesn't mean their own personality can't come through it. What I mean is this. I use this model called the airplane model. And I've done a whole webinar on this before with the Rocket Company, but I use the airplane model, and it's really simple. It's takeoff, what I call introduction. It's takeoff like you're flying a plane. It's cruising altitude, which is the main points of the sermon, and then it's landing, which is application. Takeoff, cruising altitude, and landing. They go along with introduction, main points, application. So I recommend at this meeting giving some type of a model so that there are expectations and you have an actual way to evaluate this preacher and the message they're going to preach. So day 0, if you will, this first meeting, the first of 3, pick a Sunday, so you got a date, pick a text, give resources, and give kind of a model or some expectations, okay? 30 days later, 1 month later, all right, so the second of 3 meetings, 1 month later, you want to review their manuscript or their outline, whatever they come back with. Here's what I'm going to preach about. You want to review that with them, have them talk through it. Here's the direction of my sermon. Here's what I'm hearing. Here's what I think the main points are. Here's what I've read in commentary. Whatever this, you want to just review the outline and the manuscript. You want to answer questions. Okay, you want to answer any questions they have. You want to give feedback. Hey, manuscript is looking great. Outline's looking so good. You seem really clear on these 2 things, but you don't seem as clear on the application. So, application is something I really want to make sure that you can spend extra time on. All right. So, for the second meeting of 3 is you want to just have a review. Okay. Then 30 days after that, which would be the 60-day mark, you want to have a practice sermon. I mentioned this earlier. Practice sermon, ideally with the preaching team. Okay, so it's not just you or the preacher sitting there. You've got a group of 10 people, maybe 15. This is Steve, this is Sally, whoever. They're going to give a sermon here for us to give some feedback to. It's going to be their first time they've preached on a Sunday coming up soon. We just want to make sure they feel comfortable, and et cetera, and give an opportunity to give feedback. So day 60, there is a practice sermon delivered with an opportunity for encouraging feedback, and of course, here's some things you can work on. And then, of course, day 90 is they preach. Okay, so 3 meetings on a 90-day calendar. It is meeting number 1 is on day 0. 30 days later, you're reviewing. 30 days after that, day 60, you're practicing, and then they're preaching 4 weeks after that, basically. So I hope that's helpful. 90 days to launch a preacher. Go to preachbetternow.com. $69 a month. That you can use today to sign up, get all of the bonuses, just so we're really, really clear When you sign up today, you're going to get Upfront Digital, which is a $499 value. When you sign up today, you're going to get a Sermon Craft notebook. When you sign up today, you're going to get all the support, all the modules that you need to grow as a preacher in your craft. You're going to get 10 new sermon stories. Hey, listen, I want to wrap it up and just respect your time. You can go to preachbetternow.com and get all the information that you need so that you can learn more about the Preaching Rocket. Thank you for being here. We will see you on our next webinar. If you remember, the Rocket Company exists to invest in you. We want you to know that we care about you. We know that you're pouring your life out. We respect you. We want to give back to you. We want to do these trainings so that we can pour into you and you can be more effective in your ministry. And we offer resources like the Preaching Rocket so that you can leave a 1-hour webinar and you can actually go, and it can be more than a 1-hour impact in your life. It can be a 10-hour, a 10-day, a 10-month, a 10-year, 30-year impact in your ministry. Thank you for being here. My name is Sam Hill. I'm a team leader with the Rocket Company. Go to preachbetternow.com to take a look at the Preaching Rocket. And thank you so much for being here. Now go and create and sustain your preaching team for your benefit and the benefit of your church. Take care now. Thanks for being here.